Carolina This Week with Tim McGinnis.
Good morning and thanks for joining us for Carolina This Week. We're coming to you this morning from the governor's office in the State House in Columbia. A full half hour with Governor Nikki Haley. Governor, thanks for taking the time to talk with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
1 year, almost 1 year since you've been in office. How do you feel when you look back on the things that you accomplished and maybe some of the things you didn't accomplish over your first year in office?
You know, I think it's been interesting. I'm excited by all of the opportunities that we've had. I'm excited by all the things we were able to prove. You know, they were all worried that the Heritage Golf Tournament would go away, and we found a sponsor for that. During a tough economy when people are finding jobs, we've announced almost 20,000 jobs. We passed tort reform and illegal immigration reform and voter ID and Medicaid reform. So we did great things. I think the hardest part for me as we're going forward is just trying to change the negativity, trying to get people to understand that we deserve better. We're a great state, and getting the legislature to understand, you know, whenever you see a decision, don't fight, don't sue, don't subpoena. Put that same energy into moving our state forward. That's probably what I've taken from this whole year, is that I've still got some work to do to get people to understand we need to be positive and understand we're going to be a great state because we are and because we can fight, not through the negativity that's happened.
Well, and you talk about that positive attitude and I want to call it a mandate for workers to answer the phone. It's a great day in South Carolina, which I called a worker the other day doing a routine beat call, and they answered that way. But now you have a couple legislators that are trying to stop that and trying to make a move to make that not happen. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think you've got legislators that want to fight. And you know what they need to understand is the whole point of that greeting was to say, it's a great day in South Carolina, how may I help you? You know, they're focused on the first part, they're not focused on the second part. It was intended to say to every employee, be proud of your state, be positive, but more importantly, remember that every person that calls you work for them. Your job is to solve their problem, route them to the right direction, get them the solution they need. It was really more accountability on behalf of the state employees while improving morale at the same time. You know, the fact that there's some legislation out there just goes to show we've got some work to do in the legislature. This isn't fun and games. This is about really moving the state forward, and you know, that's what I'm trying to do.
It seems to me that in the last legislative session, the state caught a break by not being quite as broke as the state thought it was. As you move into this next legislative session, and who knows what surprises lie ahead, particularly with the state's economy and the country's economy, what do you foresee as being the challenges in the upcoming legislative session?
Well, I don't totally agree with what you said in the beginning. You know, I think that we came in, I know that I came in and there were 3 deficits sitting in front of us. And the first thing we did was we resolved 2 by just cutting back and prioritizing and saying how we're going to fix this. And then the third one was so big that we had to end up going back and saying, okay, we've got to go and deal with this in a different way. What we know this year is there are no deficits. The reason there are no deficits is because we are prioritizing how we spend. We understand that spending caps are important. We understand it's not what you spend, but how you spend. So, you know, last year we came in with $800 million shortfall. We ended up with a surplus. It's because we're starting to be smarter about how we spend. Now, did it go the way I wanted? I vetoed $213 million, hoping to live within the spending cap, and the legislature only agreed with about $800,000. So we've got some work to do. But at the same time, we are going through our executive budget now, and we are prioritizing. We're saying, what would the state need? You know, we have deprived mental health for a long time. You're going to see us bump up mental health and start to give those people who can live productive lives the services they need so that they can get back on track. We're going to look at law enforcement and make sure that they have what they need. But others are going to have to suffer because of that. And so part of that's just making sure that we're always looking at the state as a business plan and making plans for years 3 and 5 and 7 and how to be smart about it.
And healthcare is one of those things that you mentioned, mental health care, but just healthcare in general is something that's going to be, is never going to be easy to deal with, I think, on a state or any level. How do you see any more changes in healthcare coming up?
Healthcare is going to be a constant issue, and what I can tell you is we've got to great director in Tony Keck with Health and Human Services, but our focus is how do we get the most health for the least amount of money? And I'm working on it from different levels. From the local level or from the state level, we did a great thing when we passed Medicaid reform because it allowed us to negotiate rates for the first time instead of hospitals and doctors just coming and saying, you owe me this. Now we can actually have a dialogue with them, which was great. On the federal level, I'm meeting with all the governors and we are going to Congress and we're saying we need block granting, which basically means give us the flexibility to spend in the way South Carolina needs it. You know, South Carolina is not Texas. Texas is not California. All of these states are different and our needs are different. So if they gave us the money, we'd actually spend less and be more effective if we would have the flexibility to do that. So those are things we're going to continue to do. Part of that is looking at services, looking at rates, looking at eligibility and who is on there. The eligibility part's federally mandated. So there's not a lot we can play with, but I'll continue to fight for ways that we can get flexibility.
Are new state workers going to be at a disadvantage over people who have been in the system for a long time because of changes to Medicaid and Medicare?
You know, I think realistically, yes, and I think that's more on the side of retirement and pensions. I think they're going to come in as we go into pension reform this next year. They're going to come in, they're probably going to have to work longer. They're going to have to pay in more and they might receive less. But our goal is to make sure that we really take care of the state employees, that it's still a great job, it's a good quality job, but we've got to look at the situation. We can't continue to go in debt over these things, and that means we can't have state employees that retire after 28 years. We're going to have to look at 30 years. We're going to have to look at benefits. We're going to have to look at those things, but that's part of making smart decisions.
I want to move on to Boeing now, which of course it looks like a big victory as far as South Carolina is concerned, that the union is coming to an agreement with the company. Actually, we're taping this on a Wednesday, so later today we expect that union vote to happen. How do you feel about that, and do you think that you played a big part in that?
Well, I think I did my job, which is when you see something wrong, you fight. And what I saw was we had the National Labor Relations Board that basically saw Boeing come in and create 1,000 jobs, and they told them they couldn't do it. And there was no reasoning for it. It was a frivolous lawsuit. It had no merit to it. I applaud Boeing because they stayed in the fight. They didn't back down, even when the NLRB kind of hinted to the point of them doing that. I think they talked to the unions. What they did was the unions realized that they're still going to have a facility in Washington State, and we now know that what was 1,000 people in Charleston is now 5,600 and growing, and we're going to continue to have a great, vibrant facility in Charleston.
Some of your critics pointed out your trip to Europe over the summer to lobby the aeronautics industry to come to South Carolina. Do you believe that trip paid off, and do you think that other companies will see what Boeing is accomplishing here and bring jobs here?
Well, I know that other companies already see it, because if you look at the fact that now we have Bridgestone, the expansion there, we have Continental Tire, we have Nephron, we have TD Bank that just put their regional hub since January, announcing almost 20,000 jobs. That's not talk, that's results. We have sold the state, and we've sold it well, and we're going to continue to sell it. The announcement of GKN last week was an air show product. It was the fact that we met with them, we talked to them, we tried to close a deal at that point, and it produced jobs in one of our highest unemployment areas, which is Orangeburg. And you will see another announcement come from that air show. I know the air show was worth it. I know that when we went there, we worked from morning till night to make sure every company there, from any country there, knew who South Carolina was and that we wanted their business. It's my job. We have a great state to sell. I'm going to continue to sell it.
And I want to talk more about bringing jobs to South Carolina after we take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're with Governor Nikki Haley this morning. Again, thank you for being here, and I want to get right into jobs. I put out on Facebook before we came up here, do you have any questions for the governor? And every comment on that post, which really weren't that many, were about jobs. What can we do to bring jobs? What can you do to bring jobs, good jobs, to South Carolina, particularly to the Grand Strand and the PD?
What we are trying to do is recruit good quality companies, and one is having a good environment. A great thing that happened is we passed tort reform this past year. We were the only state in the Southeast that didn't have caps on frivolous lawsuits. Helped us tremendously. We have a good quality workforce. We're selling that, but you're going to see us go forward and really focused on job training, matching up employees with employers. We continue to be one of the lowest unionized participation states in the country. That's a great selling point as I continue to talk to companies. So what have we produced from that? Bridgestone announced their largest investment in North America in Aiken, South Carolina. 850 jobs. Then we turn around, we saw Continental come to Sumter, South Carolina, 1,700 jobs. Nephron coming to West Columbia, 800 jobs. TD Bank putting their southeastern hub, 1,600 jobs. All of these things, we're bringing manufacturing jobs. Keep in mind, we now can tout, we have 3 of the 4 largest tire producers in the world in South Carolina. We build planes, we build cars, we build tires, we make medicine, we make things. And now that we've also got this Boeing suit under our belt as a win, all of this is telling companies that South Carolina is the state to watch. I'm going to keep on selling it as big as I can, and I think we're going to keep on winning. And we've got a lot of companies interested. My goal is to make sure that it's not always Charleston, Greenville, and Columbia, that we are looking into those rural areas, and we've seen that. We've seen Be Green go to Jasper. We've seen the door manufacturing company go to Denmark. We've seen Clarendon and Marlboro and Chester and Lawrence. We're trying to get them everywhere. And the Grand Strand is another side. Part of it's tourism, and then the other part is jobs. What we are trying to do is what manufacturing companies can we get into that area, but also the tourism side. Charleston was named the #1 tourist destination in the country. That's good for Myrtle Beach. That's good for the Grand Strand, because what we want them to do is just come to South Carolina. And when they come, I'm working with our tourism director to let them see that there are great parts of South Carolina, not just Charleston. We've got Hilton Head, we've got Myrtle Beach, we've got the Cliffs in the upstate. So it's selling South Carolina so that people take notice. And my job is to continue to make sure they take notice, and I will.
Of course, one of the things that we on the Grand Strand and in the PD want to see, many of us want to see, some don't want to see it so much, is I-73, saying that that will bring jobs. Where do you stand on I-73? Is this something that the state and the federal government should be doing more to get built?
I've always supported I-73. I mean, we know realistically that it will bring more tourism, it will bring more jobs, it will bring more to our economy. The fact is we're dealing with a federal government that's broken, that isn't really being supportive in terms of infrastructure in any regular way. We've got a state that can't afford I-73, so we've got to get coalitions together. And so that's part of what we're dealing with. I know our office met with an I-73 coalition this past week. We're going to continue to try and work on that. That's part of our long-term business plan of not can we get this done, it's how do we get it done.
How do your talks go on the federal level? I imagine a Republican administration in South Carolina might have a tough time working with the current administration in Washington.
You know, it's all about allies. You have to build relationships. And so what I do is I'm on the executive committee of the Republican Governors Association. We really try and fight in terms of what South Carolina needs, whether it's Medicaid help with flexibility, whether it's the health care mandate, whether it's illegal immigration, all that through talking to Congress, working with our U.S. senators and our congressmen and making sure that they know the needs of what our companies need and what the state needs. So I work a lot through our federal delegation. I work a lot through our governor colleagues. And when we need to, I call President Obama's administration and tell him I need help. I don't always get it. But the goal is to just try and build those relationships and make sure that at the end of the day, I'm always fighting for South Carolina.
What do you feel causes some of the friction between you and the legislature, and not just the Democrats in the legislature, even some people in your own party? Is there a way to bridge that, do you think, in the upcoming session?
I'm determined to do it. It is the most frustrating part because I see it's holding the state back. You know, we've got a legislature that's so used to saying no and can't. They can't see the forest for the trees. They don't understand it's bigger than South Carolina. We can be so much, and instead of every time they see something that goes against their power, or every time they see something that disagrees with their decision, they want to sue and they want to fight. It's wrong. I wish we could take that same energy and get them to see we're Team South Carolina. Republican or Democrat, we're Team South Carolina. We need to be fighting for Boeing. We need to be fighting for the ports. We need to be fighting for infrastructure. We need to be working to get companies here. We don't need infighting. And so while they continue to be focused on no and can't, I continue to be focused on yes, we are, and this is how we're going to get it done. And that's my goal, is for the people of South Carolina to understand we deserve better. We deserve better, and we're going to get it. And I know the vision that this state has. I know what we can be, and I'm going to make sure we do that. And regardless of what hurdles get in the way, I'm going to jump right over them.
All right. A very determined governor. Let's take a quick break, come back and finish up our conversation. Be right back. Welcome back to our conversation with Governor Nikki Haley. Again, thanks for taking the time out to talk to us this morning. We were talking a little bit about some of the divide between you and the legislature, and the most recent example of that has been with the Georgia port expansion and your administration's, I guess, willingness to give the grant to Georgia to go ahead and go forward with that expansion, the environmental. At any rate, should South Carolina have, in essence, helped Georgia expand its port when we're looking at Charleston and possibly Jasper port expansions ourselves?
Well, and I think that's the wrong premise. That's the wrong question to ask, because as I came into this administration, what I knew as a legislator, what I knew as a business person, and what I knew as a citizen is that we had a DHEC board that was political and slow. And I knew that that was one of the first things I had to change in order for us to get new companies to come into this state. So what we did was we replaced the entire DHEC board. We put prominent, strong business people on there that understood time is money. And if you're costing a business time, you're costing them money. Their number one instructions were, don't be political, regardless of who comes and asks you, and make sure that we're expedient in the way that we do things. What we had to make sure of was they set benchmarks. Georgia's governor, Governor Deal, flew down here and asked if we would offer him the courtesy of, instead of the staff hearing their appeal, that the board would hear it. I offered him the same courtesy I would offer to any other governor, or that I know that he would offer to me. And so what happened was they went in front of the board. We didn't tell them DHEC what to do. We said, do the right thing. And what came back was they didn't meet the benchmarks. They didn't have that as of the day before. Overnight, Georgia came back and gave 50 years worth of financing, 50 years worth of accountability measures to go above and beyond the benchmark, to make sure that they dealt with the dissolved oxygen, to make sure they dealt with the wetlands. In spite of the fact that the Corps said they didn't need South Carolina's permission to go ahead with it anyway. They went and did what was right. South Carolina has to understand, you don't win by undercutting your neighbor. That's not what we need to do. You win by being better. You win by fighting. You win by winning. And so what happened was DHEC gave them the permit based on merit. And you've got some people who don't like what DHEC did, but what they did was they weren't political. They gave it to them because they came through on measures that they needed to. What do we need to do? Since then, we've seen Governor Deal and both Georgia U.S. senators send a letter saying that they completely support Charleston Port, they completely support the funding, and want to partner with it. That's a win in itself, because Lindsey Graham said he could not get the funding without their support. Secondly, we want to see a vibrant Charleston Port that flows over into Jasper with a plan for Georgetown. There is no reason we can't have all great ports, and we need to see it that way. It's not one or the other. It's not South Carolina or Georgia. It's not Charleston or Jasper or Georgetown. It's all of them. I'm not looking at Georgia. I'm looking at New Jersey and Virginia and everybody and saying, what do I need to do to make sure we're the best state in the country with the best ports in the country? And we will have that.
You talk about the Georgetown port, and right now I know they're looking into possible kind of public-private partnerships to try to get that done. Do you think that there's more that the state could do to help Georgetown deepen its port?
I think that we have to look at Georgetown as a port as well. I want Georgetown to be as successful as Jasper and Charleston. And there's a plan for each one of them, and we'll have to treat each one of them differently. But it comes from having a business plan, and that's what I want the state to see. That's what I want the legislature to see, is it's not which one. We don't pick favorites. It's how do we make them all great? And that's my job, is to make sure that we are moving in the right direction, we make them all great, but we are not a state that undercuts people. We're not a state that is going to continue to play dirty politics. That's not me. That's not the people of this state. That's not what we're going to be known for. We're going to be known for a great state that plays by the rules and wins because we deserve it.
Now, just kind of more on a personal level, a lot of the things that you read about Governor Nikki Haley and your family in the newspaper seems to be a lot of smaller things that are happening in your personal life at the mansion as opposed to what's happening in the office. How do you feel about some of these, I don't want to call them attacks, but some of the reporting that's come out about you?
You There's always going to be that. We don't take it personally. There's always going to be naysayers. There's always going to be people that want to find fault with things that we do. That's politics. That's what the Democrats are supposed to do. That's what the naysayers are supposed to do. What we continue to do is our best. I wake up every day and say, let's do the best we can, and then tomorrow morning I wake up and I say, okay, let's do this again. If I paid attention to those things, I wouldn't govern well. And with all due respect, we don't read the local paper. We don't watch local TV because I'm not going to govern to the media. What I am going to do is govern to the point that I can show results to the people of this state so that they can be proud of a state that I'm incredibly proud of.
Any regrets over the last year? No
regrets at all. I think the only thing is trying to figure out how we can take what we've done this first year and make it better for year two. The goal is to say, I don't know that I ever go home at night and say, how could I have done that better? That's my number one goal is how could we have done this better? What else could we have done? I'll continue to think like that. Regrets are a waste of time, but thinking about how you can improve yourself, that's really what moves things.
Last question for you. We have the January 16th, we have the First in the South primary debate happening just before the First in the South primary. You ready to endorse anyone?
I think I will be soon. What I'm looking at is really from a governor's standpoint, which administration would be helpful when it comes to the healthcare situation? Which one's going to understand we need flexibility in Medicaid? Which one is going to make jobs and the economy number one? And that's dealing with the debt, that's dealing with the spending, that's dealing with our credit rating. Which one understands that we need to be energy independent? But who's got the courage and who's going to go and defeat this president? That's bottom line is I can tell you that with having to go through this administration again, it's going to be an incredible struggle for South Carolina. So I will be close to an endorsement soon, I think, but I've always said my endorsement doesn't mean anything. It's the people of the state that I think are really going to step up. But at the end of the day, we want a new president.
And whoever gets that nomination, I asked you this last time, I'll just ask again anyway. If they came and said, Nikki Haley, will you be my running mate?
Absolutely not. I love being governor of South Carolina. I have too much I want to accomplish for this state. And I made a promise to the people of this state. I plan on honoring my word.
Again, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us for Carolina This Week. We will be back in the studio next week. Hope to see you then.